Good morning, good afternoon, whatever it may be for you. Happy Cinco de Mayo or Happy Taco Tuesday, whatever it may be for you. And hope you are celebrating in all the best ways you possibly can during this time and being able to at least enjoy a taco. All right. Again, I'll try to keep this down to about 15 minutes and we'll see what comes up today. So without further ado, all right. I will say that this one came up inverted, but we'll talk more about inverted cards on another time. What I got is the Knight of Rods, also known as the Knight of Wands. Wands and rods, depending on what deck you're using, those names are interchangeable, much like coins and pentacles are interchangeable. So keep that in mind when you see a deck that says maybe rods or wands, something, or clubs. Again, that's what our standard playing card deck is based off of, is the wands and the rods and the clubs. So maybe I'll talk a little bit about some of those aspects as we get going as well. But I want to focus on this guy. So the Knight of Rods, he is heading off into adventure. He is facing away from us in the card. He's clearly off on a mission. What I find interesting about this one is he kind of has a dragon on his helmet, which is really interesting. But it does bring us to one of the more prominent features of each of the suits is that they do have an element. And I think I may have mentioned this before, but I'm not too sure. The element of fire is really what is ruled by the rods or the wands. So even though most of the rods in this are rods with kind of a flower attached to them, but we'll get into that part of it too. So he's got his wand, which happens to be kind of like a banner or a staff over his shoulder, might be a jousting lance. He also has another one that's kind of on his back. I think it's the emblem actually on his robe, on his cloak. So this one is just kind of depicted on there. His This is a very red card. Reds, oranges, gold, things like that are all really on this card a lot. He's wearing what looks like a copper or maybe even a gold suit of armor. And his horse's mane, even the horse kind of looks like it's probably a red-haired horse or like a gingered horse. You can't really see his hair in this, but I will tell you that in the suit of rods, most of them have light colored hair, be it red or blonde. They're usually blue or green eyed. And this is kind of where I'll talk a little bit about that, about the aspects of the people that each suit represents. Suits represent a certain sort of type, a like being of fairly light skin but dark hair and dark eyes. I would not be a suit of rods. I would not be represented by these cards. Suit of rods really represents people with lighter complexion, lighter eyes, as I mentioned, red hair, blonde hair, very fair skinned typically. That is not to say these have to be those people. But if you're looking at the deck and you're like, well, gee, I wonder what that person might look like, very likely this is what they're going to look like. The other thing is they are typically people who are of a fiery personality. So they could be, speaking of zodiac and things of that nature, they could be fire signs, they could be Aries, they could be um, the Sagittarius, those hot-headed kind of people. So the Leos, a lot of Leos. So you want to look at it that way. They're also creative, very passionate people, usually with a lot of ideas. And when I say creative, they don't necessarily have to be artistic. Let's think of people in the sciences. People in the sciences are really very creative too. They have to think on their feet. They have to come up with new ideas. So these are the people with ideas, big ideas, exciting ideas. Not always the skill set to actually activate those ideas. So these are where Like cups would be people who are very emotional, more artistic in that sense of being in touch with who they are, in touch with those emotions. These are the people in touch with their mind. They use a lot of brain power. They could be engineers, scientists, artists, architects, things of that nature. If it's physically something creative that they can do, if they can touch it, it's very likely that they're the suit of rods, or the suit of rods represents that type of person. So in the case of the Knight of Rods, and we'll talk a little bit about knights too, then and in this in the typical tarot deck, you have the page, the knight, the queen, the king. That's the order of it. There's a couple decks that are different, and I hope to get to those at some point. It's really exciting, some of the ways that other decks have interpreted what the page and the knight actually are. Page and knight were melded together as we became the playing cards from the tarot. They joined to become the jack. So they're kind of in between. The other thing is, while the page is typically very androgynous, I think I may have mentioned this before, that there's a lot of androgyny in the image of the page. Knights are a little less so. They are a little more masculine leaning, although in some decks it is hard to tell. So you can have knights and pages who are kind of both. They can have very feminine aspects and very masculine aspects. And part of that is because, again, the energy of these cards is really mutable. It doesn't have to be masculine or feminine. It's a very mutable energy. This guy is in a hurry. This guy is not a guy who thinks things through. What I've always attributed to the knights is the knights are the college kids. So while the page might be the kid who's still essentially in school, all the way up to like high school, the knights are the college kids. The knights are the people who they're in their early 20s up until probably about their early 30s. That's usually what is represented by a knight. So if you're looking at this as this is the college age, this is the people who are just starting out. They're young, they're energetic, they're still very idealistic. That is this guy. Idealistic, full of ideas, full of passion, no clue how to actually implement it. So when you see the knight, and you can see, he's just like totally gung-ho to run forward in any kind of trouble he might hit. And he's got this dragon on his head. So that also tells you he kind of has a sense of invincibility, which is very much a fire sign thing. They feel like they are the destroyer. Nothing else can destroy them. They're safe. So fire signs, a lot of energy. This guy's extra energy because, again, he's that idealistic age that is all about energy. And he's waving his banner. Even his cloak is red. And the sky is red. And again, I would say that for this card, I generally interpret the red skies in this as a sunrise rather than a sunset. I don't really see it as something coming to an end, unless, of course, it is inverted. When cards come up inverted, which again, when you draw a card from the deck, how do you draw it? You take it from the top, you flip it this way. You don't flip it this way, so that you actually get what the interpretation should be. So he came up inverted. So in this case, I would say that he's going barreling towards trouble. He's going barreling towards something that's going to blow up in his face. And being he's a fire sign, and being that he is someone who thinks of something, but doesn't necessarily think of something before he leaps at it, then he's probably going to get into trouble. So that's kind of what I get when I see an inverted card. So kind of the message for today is maybe look before you leap. Take your time. Think things through. Find the details on things. This guy is not a detail guy. He's an idea man. Big idea. Let's go with it. Let's not stop to think about it. That's really what his core purpose is. And in a reading, he's usually a person or an energy that is all about that. Go, go, go. Let's make it happen. I've got a big idea. Let's get it rolling. And he's not really at the start of the idea, but he's the motivator of that idea. He's going to push it forward. Somebody else's problem to figure out the details. Somebody else's problem to figure out the budget and the plan and how it's going to happen. He's like, I got this idea. Let's make it happen. And usually that makes him kind of a good person also to reach out to other people. That's not to say that like he's really super adept at knowing who to reach out to. He just does. He's like, hey, I got an idea. And he's willing to share it. Super willing to share all the ideas all the time. The other thing that I like to notice in this card is that he's got a rather smug expression. Again, what I really love about this deck is that she does a lot for the expressions of the characters. She does a lot for that if it's an androgynous character, if it's a more feminine character, what is the energy behind them? She does a really good job at that. So again, it's the Mary Hansen deck. So just putting that out there. He's got a very smug look. He looks like he knows he's the smartest one in the room, and he's probably not willing to give up that position. Again, this guy's young, he's idealistic. He's probably never been told that one of his ideas is stupid. Everything's always been, sure, let's give it a go. Let's see what happens. And if it blows up in his face, it's like, well, it was just an experiment. That's kind of how he rolls with things still. Hasn't learned a lot, hasn't gained a lot of insight to how, like, proper behaviors, proper ways to go about things, proper avenues to give your proposal. Again, very business oriented kind of world is what this is too. So you see he's got a very smug look. This is somebody who hasn't really been punched down too much by life. And that's good. Again, when he comes up inverted though, that probably is somebody who's had a lot of their ideas shattered. So you want to look at that side of it. So I'm going to kind of end on a low note a little bit, but it's a little more grounding as well. When you see this card come up inverted and it has to do with the parent or it has to do with someone in their lives, it's probably somebody who's had a lot of really good ideas but been punched down so many times they're a little bit afraid to share them. They're the person who has a cool idea and will not share it with anybody until it's perfect. And we all know perfect isn't really a thing when you've got a new idea, especially if you're younger. You've got a really great idea and it can be perfect, but you probably are going to need some help getting it off the ground. So one of the things with him when he comes up inverted is usually it's somebody that might need a little extra help, or you might want to approach them in a way that says, hey, I fully accept that this is your idea. I'm not here to steal it. I'm here to help you with it. And that's kind of the energy of the day too, is I'm here to help you. I'm not here to steal it. We can all share. We can all learn together. You've got some really good ideas. Let's build on that. So that's something you want to really look at with this card too. I feel like I talked a lot about his personality and a little bit about what the knights are, and I hope that's really helpful to you. Until next time, maybe we'll get some more higher arcana cards or maybe something really interesting. So I will see you next time. If you want to see more, there's a whole playlist starting on this. I'm sure I'll post it on here and maybe a link in the corner. So check it out and have a wonderful day. Have a happy Taco Tuesday.